Remember not to do that first. Okay. Good evening. We are happy you are all here this evening. Before we get started, I would ask you to join Councilman Hens in a word of prayer.
Thanks. Father, we welcome your presence. We are grateful for a beautiful Tuesday, for the changing of the seasons. We are grateful to live in a place like Nacogdoches. We are grateful for city staff that takes such good care of us. We are grateful for such incredible citizens that set this place apart. Would you give us favor and wisdom to make decisions that are in line with your kingdom coming to Nacogdoches as it is in heaven? We want this place to be a city on a hill and stand out in a great way among all the other cities and all the other towns. So give us favor and wisdom. We welcome you here. We trust you and we love you. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you. I would now call the meeting of June the 4th, 2019 to order. And first on our agenda is community recognition, where we recognize individuals and groups for their contributions to our city and fellow citizens. And I'm going to come down here. And I'm going to ask that Veronica Jones, and then if I have students, Victoria Martinez, Arline Middlebrook, and Alexa Garcia, would you all come forward, please? Good evening. Okay, and you are?
Arline Middlebrook.
Arline and?
Victoria Martinez. Alexa Garcia.
And Alexa. And do you know why you're here tonight? For Ms. Jones. Can you tell me just in a couple of words about her teaching?
She's nice.
She's nice. How about you?
She helps us learn.
She helps you learn. That's a good thing for a teacher, isn't it? And how about you?
She's nice.
She's nice. Well, that is great. She sounds like a fabulous teacher. Your principal said, I couldn't be happier for Ms. Jones. She does an outstanding job reaching her students and has a true heart for children. What an accolade. That is marvelous. Now, you teach at Nettie Marshall, correct? And you teach, tell me a little bit about what you teach.
I'm going to get my parents because y'all didn't tell me this. I was just supposed to come and say hi. Y'all brought my babies. I am a first grade teacher at Nettie Marshall. I teach the English part of dual language, reading, math, and my partner teaches science and social studies and Spanish. That's about it.
Okay. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot to those of us that are not teachers, and we are very grateful for the job that you do. And this, you won Region 7 Education Service Center Award. Is that what it was? The Teacher of the Year contest. Okay, for this month. So we have a small token. This is a brick, small brick, but it is from the city, and it is in recognition and appreciation for the work you do for our city, for our community, and the children in our community. So thank you very, very much. Of course. Thank you, and thank you, girls, for coming up. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next teacher is Becky Martin, and I believe we have, is Mae Johnston here? Okay, come on. Good evening. I'm doing great. Don't be nervous. You seem a little bit nervous. How are you tonight?
Good.
Okay, and what grade are you in?
I'm going into my freshman year of high school.
Okay, okay. And so she has been your teacher this past year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about her?
She's an amazing teacher. I've never been great at math, but she actually helped me learn this year. She brought my grade up so much, and I'm so thankful for having her as a teacher.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you for talking to her about that. And you are at which school? Mike Moses Middle School. Okay. Your principal says she brings to the table a wealth of knowledge and experience. So that's terrific. Can you tell us a little bit about, you want to say anything about your teaching and what you do?
I have 8th grade Algebra 1 and some advanced 7th grade, and then I'm not sure what my title is, but I help the other math teachers with lesson plans and tests and things like that.
Okay. You were actually brought in to do that, weren't you, a couple years ago? So that, and that's called an interventionist, I believe, is your fancy term over there.
Or instruction. Some people
Instruction.
call them instructional coaches.
Okay.
You know,
Okay,
I don't need a
terrific.
title, I just do the job.
You do the job. Well, we are very fortunate for that, and we would like for you to have a brick in appreciation and recognition of the job we do for our kids. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Our next recognition is for a group, and I actually, this is so well written. If you will bear with me, I want to read this so I don't leave anything out. The city of Nacogdoches is proud of the heritage that built the gardens that border the west side of the CVB, and it is a priority to maintain and care for the plants there. True gardeners are always updating, replanting, and sometimes completely tearing out existing plants. Living organisms are constantly evolving, and a garden is no different. With this in mind, the west side of the CVB gardens received some tender, loving care, thanks to several donors. Camellias, azaleas, and a Japanese maple are a few of the plants that have now taken root downtown. City departments and local volunteers prepared the ground, planted, and mulched the flower beds. The downtown gardens were originally envisioned by Charles Bright, funded by many generous citizens of Nacogdoches, designed by local gardener Jeff Apt, engineered by Steve Bartlett, and constructed by M.H. Moore Construction Company. In the beginning, one could hardly imagine the lush greenery that exists in the mature gardens today. But what was once a hot pavement and fledgling grass is now a haven where hundreds of visitors and residents find shade and beauty. Mr. Bright had a wish concerning downtown. Quote, "I hope this plaza will one day be a wooded square, a place where people can sit on park benches and get out of the sun." So we would like to recognize tonight Richard Cook, owner of Cook's Nursery. If you would come up. I saw Angela. Is anyone else here with the Garden Capital Committee of Texas? And Brooke Barber, manager of Lowe's. Are you here? Great. You all come on up. And Angela, I'm going to ask you if you would like to say anything about this project.
Well, as Garden Capital of Texas, that is absolutely one of our goals, is to make our beautiful Nacogdoches even more beautiful and to add lush plants and trees when we have the opportunity. In this, we were invited to participate by Anna and the other organizations that were taking part, and we're very proud of what's happened, and we're very honored to donate and participate, and very excited for the CVB.
Of course. Brooke, would you like to say anything?
On behalf of Lowe's of Nacogdoches, we're just thankful to be part of this great community, and anything we can ever do for y'all at any time, just please feel free to let us know.
And Richard?
Well, many of y'all know me, but I'm Richard Cook, and I have Cook's Nursery. We've been here for over 50 years, and we're just proud to get to donate to the community and add to it.
Thank you. We appreciate you too. So I'm going to have each of you a brick. Committee, y'all can fight over it. And here's one for you, Richard. Thank you very much. And if you'll scooch in, we'll have a photograph real quick. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. Good job. Good job. Good stuff. Our next agenda item is our open forum. The open forum is the public's opportunity to address council on any matter related to the city that is not on the agenda. Our rules and procedures for council meetings apply to the open forum and include disrupting the public meeting as a violation of state law, and no cursing is allowed. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, City Council generally cannot discuss, consider, or take action on matters not listed on the agenda. So our first speaker is Savion Nugent. If you would like to come forward, please.
Good to see you all this afternoon. I'll be very swift as I can be. I am here today as a flag staked in the uncharted territory of justice. I am here as a vessel. I am here as an advocate. I am here as a community organizer, as a representative of those who have been the chronic minority for so long. I am here for the tired. I am here for the poor. And I am here simply because God placed me here. There is work to do, especially under the guise of accountability and justice. Here in Nacogdoches, we are in a crossroads. I am specifically speaking in regards to the cases of Lindsay, Shannon, and Kayla, all of whom were on the receiving end of broken policing at the Overlook Apartments a few weeks ago. The fear in Shannon's eyes, while her face was being pressed into the concrete, will always follow me, even beyond the video. The revelation that Kayla Jackson was also arrested with no probable cause in regards to the charge in which she is being inflicted, the speedy indictment of Lindsay Ogbonna, the prospects of a 2 to 20-year sentence, the prospects of a felony on her record, as she is fighting for her future at the age of 19 years old. All of these things did not sit well with me. After the grand jury indictment, I made a phone call, and I made another phone call, and another. As a result, a coalition was formed. The Nacogdoches Accountability Coalition, NAC, NAC. We're comprised of teachers, activists, political figures, parents, doctors, and students. We have a unified goal. We want accountability exercised effectively. We want a Citizens Police Oversight Committee here in Nacogdoches, and we want Lindsay Ogbonna, Shannon Williams, and Kayla Jackson exonerated of their charges, because they are indeed innocent. We have blazed a trail that has not been taken on before, and we understand that there is a mountain that we have to climb, and we need your help. We are asking for fairness during this process. In the coming day or so, we'll be sending a formal request for a thorough, impartial, and independent investigation of Officer Joshua Anders. We want the Texas Rangers involved outside of their Nacogdoches affiliations. We are confident that these requests will be honored for an independent investigation. We have no ill intent whatsoever. We despise no one and no institution. And with your acquiescence, you can make the difference. And we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Now I have Michael Strong.
Mayor Brophy, other members of the City Council, good evening. My name is Michael Strong, and I'd like to read a letter which I have submitted to the Daily Sentinel in order to make my thoughts to the public record again. There's still been no action by the City Council on the incident that took place on the 10th of April. In my letter to the Daily Sentinel on May 22nd, I discussed that incident when a group of Black university students, happily leaving a pool party, were accosted by a white off-duty police officer who lost control and ended up throwing 2 young women to the ground. A friend of mine made a telling comment regarding this incident. What would have happened if a Black police officer had come across a group of young white women and thrown 2 of them to the ground? In Nacogdoches, this is still a rhetorical question. We know that the Black officer would have been the one blamed. I was disappointed to see the agenda for the City Council meeting tonight does not include any discussion of the independent investigation that the mayor and the city manager promised, nor of a new Citizens Review Board, or of improved training for the police. Instead, there's only discussion in executive session of the anticipated litigation resulting from this incident. This is a bureaucratic response designed to protect the council, but not to address the underlying issues. Our city council must remember that it's their duty, your duty, as well as the police, to serve and protect everyone in Nacogdoches. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. Now I have Brenda Riggs.
I'm Brenda Riggs. Recent letters to the editor of the local newspaper demonstrate a reflexive and uncritical deference to police and defensiveness of any police behavior. Those letters deny that local police actions have any motivation in bias. This position is actually refuted by scientific sociological research that has exposed the ubiquity of bias and bias's effects on behaviors that cause unjustified harms, including specific police behaviors. Those letters to the editor also demonstrate some pervasive psychological phenomena that accompany bias, namely denial, false justifications, and psychological projection. Bias is actually so common and so below one's level of awareness that the entire scientific method is designed to circumvent pervasive and hidden bias. If we accept that scientists have biases, that includes doctors, okay? If we accept that scientists have biases that they must circumvent to find truth, what makes one think that police officers are free of bias? It is a pretentious thing to assert. Because this council, as of yet, has failed to respond to calls for a police oversight board, please accept from me a gift of knowledge in the form of a book by the name of Biased for each of you, city council members, mayor, police chief, city manager, all of you who could affect the direction of the city toward a more respectful and justice-oriented police department and away from discriminatory and escalating policing tactics. The book relates the sociological research on bias in policing. It is by a researcher and social psychologist who is a professional advisor to police departments. It isn't a pleasant thing to have to confront one's enculturated biases, but it is a necessary thing if one is sincerely well-intentioned and cares about the harms that bias-motivated behaviors cause. I speak from the experience of a lifelong Texan who has been enculturated in implicit racial bias and who has observed my own past harmful bias-motivated behaviors. By the way, if it helps getting over motivational roadblocks, our biased enculturation may not be entirely our fault, but it is our fault if we do not honestly examine our biases. That examination is actually essential to the practice of the Golden Rule.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move to items to be removed from the consent agenda, and if nothing is to be removed, then the chair would entertain a motion for approval.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as it's written, as it stands.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as it is written. If no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. From our regular agenda, item number 6, consider a contract approval with Schomburg and Polk to provide professional engineering services for Church Street and South Fredonia storm sewer rehabilitation. Good evening, Mr. Opperman. How are you?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Case Opperman, Assistant City Engineer. Tonight we're bringing to you a contract for consideration of approval for professional engineering services for Church Street and South Fredonia storm sewer rehab with Schomburg and Polk, Inc. We've obviously recently had some very significant rainfall events, and that kind of expounded on what we already knew to be true about both Church Street and South Fredonia. Significant flooding in the area due to these storm sewers, which are both in failing condition. They've historically made surrounding areas particularly vulnerable to rainfall events, and we've seen evidence of several flood and damage that's occurred from that to several surrounding homes. Schomburg and Polk has recently just had experience with repairs of this type, so staff selected them as the best candidate to do work on this project. Services to be provided will include design topo surveying, preparation of preliminary design schematics and estimates, including hydraulic calculations, and also final plans, details, and bidding. The total maximum authorization for this is $80,100, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have after public comment.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to speak to this issue? Okay, hearing none. Council, questions and comments?
I have one question. This is downhill sewage.
Yes,
What issues are we having at that point in just that location, those two streets?
Yes, sir. These are, to be clear, storm sewer, so it's drainage from rainfall events, not sanitary sewer, which would be, obviously waste. The problems that we've had, that we've observed, and we've done some videoing of the line on South Fredonia. We've also done some probing, jet rotting, is what we call it, on South Church. We've found blockages on Church Street specifically, and on Fredonia. The video has shown segments of the pipe that has actually collapsed. When these pipes are blocked or collapsed, you can imagine they don't flow as they should. So the capacity is diminished, and then when significant events do happen, when all the water doesn't get out like it's supposed to, it just backs up and backs up, as you've seen, I'm sure.
Does it back up all the way up to Phillip Street?
We would hope not. We'd be in big danger if that happened.
Yeah.
But specifically down in the bottoms near Church Street at the dead end. And actually, I'd mentioned that we're fairly certain that the problems that we're having on Church Street is also contributing to some significant flooding that we've had on the soccer complex as well in the past. So getting these pipes both designed again to make sure they're of the correct capacity and replaced is going to be essential to solving these problems.
Okay, so engineering is basically to remove the old pipes or anyway replace them with a larger pipe.
What we're thinking on Church Street is probably going to have to be upsized. The design, the hydraulic study, and all that will determine that. We think we might be able to just get by with a liner on Fredonia Street, which is just a repair type that just basically sucks a new interior into the existing pipe, obviously correcting any collapsed segments that might have occurred on Fredonia in the past couple of weeks since that rain, or since we had that video done. But that would be the repair scheme for those, either upsizing and or lining those pipes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
How many companies submitted bids?
Well, you don't, how shall I say this? On engineering services, we have to go by basically qualifications instead of bidding. We can't bid services. What we did last year was we actually went out for qualifications from all the area firms, even some outside our area. And they all submitted qualifications, so we basically got, quote unquote, a stable of engineers. And what we've done is, as we come up with these projects, we take each of these engineers' qualifications and we evaluate them based on their expertise, which they've shown us. And we've got significant history with Schomburg and Polk and KSA and most of the engineers that we've got in our stable. So we kind of have a very good idea of what they can do and what they can do well.
Do we know what the time frame?
120 days is what we've given them for the contract. If the contract's executed today, well, tomorrow, technically, it'd be 120 days from execution. Yes, ma'am.
Difficult to preempt when you know when you know rain's coming, right?
Yeah, well, we're hoping.
You got a plan?
Well, we're not hoping. Let me back up and not anger anybody. We don't hope for dry weather this summer, but we hope for non-flooding weather. So maybe
Gotcha.
we can avoid any significant issues until we're done reinstalling this pipe.
Great.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? If not, Chair would entertain a motion for approval of the contract.
Make a motion to approve item number 6 for provide professional engineering service for Church and South Street sewer rehab.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we approve agenda item number 6, for the contract with Schomburg and Polk. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Agenda item number 7, consider accepting agreement for professional engineering services from SCS Engineers for landfill permit modification. Mr. Bartlett, good evening.
Evening, Mayor and Council. This is hiring engineer night, so
You're busy.
have for your consideration an agreement from SCS Engineers, again for professional engineering services, specifically for a landfill permit modification. And so I wanted to take just a minute to explain the background of all this, and we've kind of changed direction, so I think it's kind of an important step to hear. Originally, or currently in your CIP budget, we had $1 million program for the landfill, and unfortunately that wasn't for construction. That was strictly to begin the process of a major permit amendment, underline major, which would be approximately a 4-year time frame of engineers, environmentalists, and surveyors working on a modified way to operate our landfill and how basically to rearrange the pantry and how we're going to store things and where. The short version of that, and we'll go in details with you in the future on that more, would be a reconfiguration of where we put waste. And one of the things we're looking at is putting a landfill on top of a landfill. So anything we can do to minimize footprint and increase garbage volumes and storage are a financial benefit to us. So as you can imagine, there's a significant amount of state and federal agency issues as well as environmental issues to pursue all that. So it is a 4-year process. The fees for all that, again, somewhere in the terms of $1 million once we negotiate those contracts. So it's a big deal. So as we were evaluating all this, we realized we're coming up within the next couple of years to having to dig some more cells. So right now we're working in Block O, which is kind of where the yellow arrow points. And I know it's hard to read all that, but that's currently where we're putting garbage. And we would open 2 new cells in that in the near future. That would be something like $2.5 million to dig those holes, but they're very special lined holes. So that was coming up in our agenda. We would begin a little work with the state to get that approved and move forward with that. The idea that we've come up with is to be able to reuse Block O that we're currently in and part of Blocks P and M, which are the other lighter colored areas, and do a minor permit amendment. And I know this is kind of confusing, but a minor permit amendment to allow us to just reorganize the front part of the pantry and store waste. It's going to basically end in deferring the cost for those cells for maybe 7 years. It's $2.5 million that we can accrue over time, and so it'll come out later, not today. It's also going to give us the ability to not have to build $2.5 million worth of cells for that period of time, and also give us a little bit more time to do this major permit amendment so that we're not literally backing up to being full. So all these were good ideas. I think it's more cost effective. It's going to save us money in the overall run. And so this is a minor permit amendment, and you think the fee that we're showing you doesn't sound minor, but compared to the $1 million fee it is. So as Case explained to you, engineers are selected by qualifications. SCS Engineers actually specializes in only landfills. And so they're one that we have used before when we evaluated this. Staff selected them as the primary candidate for this contract to present to you. We have negotiated a total fee of $103,500. $5,000 of that is a contingency fee. We never know when we go to the state how many iterations we go through. So they kind of program a contingency fee to have to bounce back a few extra questions. And if we don't do that, and they've been very fair about that, then they won't charge that fee. So somewhere in that $100,000 range is what we're expecting as a lump sum fee. So I guess I'll answer any questions after public comment. I know it's a bit confusing, so I'm happy to kind of clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this? Hearing none. Council, questions or comments for Mr. Bartlett?
I just got a question out of curiosity. How many layers can you have on a landfill? landfill. I've seen landfills that look like mountains.
Well, we were thinking about calling this Mount Bartlett, but I'm not sure that's, people have accused me that. Quite honestly, it's all about what you propose to do. So when we go in and permit a landfill, we propose a certain height. So we can put layers and layers up to that height. And interestingly, we cover this every day. So we have garbage, dirt, and we go that to a very specific height. And believe it or not, we survey it every year. We're now doing drone surveys to try to find that out. So right now we're permitted about 12 feet of height, if you can kind of picture that. The major amendment permitting we're talking about would start to probably increase that and would bridge from cell to cell bigger areas. And so we may go up 20, 25 feet in height. And this very preliminary.
But that's if TCEQ agrees, right?
Yes, we don't even get to unlock the gate without TCEQ agreeing. So it would be something we would propose and they would approve, correct. And it's also something, by the way, this overall plan, this major amendment is something we'll bring to you in a little more graphical format so you can see it. And kind of explain to you exactly where, but we've got to get our engineer to start that process with it, just to get you some exhibits and explanations and costs and things involved in it. But the short answer is landfill on top of a landfill. That's where we'd like to go. And I omitted one thing, and I apologize, Councilman. I wanted to add, this major amendment piece, we think can generate an additional 20 years of life. So Case and I are hoping that we can generate 40 to 50 years of landfill life. And that is a significant benefit for the city of Nacogdoches. Many, many cities don't own and operate their own landfill. And so they're kind of at the mercy of a private company hauling their waste. So we will own our own. And I think as the years go by, that'll be an extreme economic benefit for us.
So for the minor adjustment, in practice, what does it look like to move around the front of the pantry?
Okay, for the minor amendment, what we will do, and basically if we don't go over our total height volume we've already permitted and just kind of move it around, then we can do this minor amendment, which is our 7-year add. So we're going to look at adding a little more waste in Block O on the first 2 cells. We've only permitted the first part of Block O. And then put a little more waste over Block P, which is kind of upper lower left-hand corner on the loop. P is still open. We're not putting waste in it. We've kind of held it off, and we're almost within a couple of feet of full. So we're going to go back and ask to go another 6 or 8 feet or whatever above that. So a little more garbage in P, a little more garbage in O, and bridge that over, and that will buy us all these years we're talking about.
So we have a little bit of excess capacity in there that we just haven't quite tapped out. Is that?
Well, we're limited right now to the heights that we proposed for those cells. We're basically going back and saying we're going to average between the two, and can we be up another few feet? And then all that translates to more volume.
Okay, thank you.
I understand the benefit of not having to spend $2.5 million right now, but are there that you can see long-term negative effects to doing this minor kicking the can down the road kind of thing?
No, the only thing to say is today's cost would be about $2.5 million. In fact, we actually spent that on Block O several years ago, so I'm using that cost figure. I think delaying this construction of the next cells for 7 years probably can result in some elevated construction cost. That's for sure. So depending on what the cost to move dirt is 7 years from now, that $2.5 million may be $3 million, and so that would be the downside to it. I think, like say on the overall, we're deferring those funds, and I think that's the bigger benefit. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Enjoy the trash talk.
Okay, so Chair will entertain a motion for approval to accept the agreement.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve agenda item number 7.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we approve agenda item number 7 as written. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Agenda item number 9, consider ordinance amending ordinance number 1778-9-18. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot 8. I apologize. Mr. Operman. Number 8, consider bid award to John Wright Construction for Central Heights water system improvements.
I'm glad to know we cleared that up because I was not prepared
To do
speak on that. Assistant City Engineer, Case Opperman, Mayor, City Council. We're also coming to you tonight asking you to consider bid award for the Central Heights Water System Improvements Project. Just a little background. In 2001, the city took ownership of the Central Heights water system. It was unfortunately in ill repair when we got it, and it's only gotten worse. We have done work to improve it as time has gone on, and we have repaired several failing water line segments. This project is an effort to continue that. Just a little bit about the project. We're needing to construct 5 separate line segments, and I'll save you from me reading about all of them. But the bid came in with John Wright Construction being the low bidder at $595,741.50. John Wright has not done work on a city project before, but they're currently working on the Austin project right now, doing the utility relocation. They're doing a very good job. And some of our references that we've got, specifically some of the engineering consultants that we work with regularly, have had good experiences with them, and so we feel comfortable in recommending them for award tonight. Any questions that y'all might have, I'd be happy to answer after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this agenda item? No? Okay. Council.
When it comes to our high bidder friend there, did they make a mistake and bid it wrongly, or were they hoping no one else would bid, or what happens in those circumstances? Every once in a while we see that.
We do, and I don't know this particular friend. I would assume that they are from far out of town, being that I've never even heard of them. But also, probably they were probably just throwing a number down to just see if the fish would bite, I guess, for lack of a better word. A lot of these companies, if they've got a lot of work going on and they're not starving at the moment, they will maybe kind of just cast their net out there and see what they can catch. But that's generally what we find with these out of kilter numbers like that. And we've seen it several times. So that would be my best guess.
Okay. Thanks.
Is there any way to give this back to Central Heights?
Well, I don't know that as of right now there's a way. So for now we own it and we take care of it as best we can.
Yeah, I know it's a requirement that we provide a quality product to Central Heights.
Yes, sir.
But this is going to be expensive.
It's very expensive. There's, like I say, a lot of problems. So unfortunately, there's a lot of time that we have to spend out there. Anywhere from 2 smaller lines. We've seen some unreal lines out there, 1.25 inches that serves a whole subdivision. It's ridiculous. So we're trying to chip away at these problems, but it does unfortunately take $600,000 to construct 5 water lines. So we're getting it as best we can.
I know that we all chuckled, but I mean, that's a serious question for me because, and bear with me since I'm new here,
Yes,
if you could educate me a little bit on why we would do this in the first place.
Well, I don't know that I can answer why we did it in the first place. It was a long time ago, and I could try and get a hold of an answer for you if we need it. But I really can't speak to why. But I know we have tried in the past to we've had potential buyers interested, and that obviously had never worked out. But I would say we're probably open to discussions if anybody would. And here's the big boss. He can probably talk a little bit more about it.
Well, I think in 2001, they were basically a water supply corporation, which is a member-owned small. We have 16 rural water supply corps, Lily Grove, Swift, all those in our area, and they were one of those. And they were struggling, I think, probably financially and probably trying to keep up with these lines. And so through some process, they came to the city, and the city agreed to purchase them and take over that system. Don't know the particulars of the dollars off the top of my head, but basically we took it over because what was fixing to happen if not, we'd have 460 or so connections without water service. So the city stepped in. Now they're treated as out of city limit customers according to our rate ordinance, which are time and a half. They're not paying city taxes, but they're paying time and a half for water rates. So Basically, we took over a water supply corporation. It was a need to happen issue. We're the big water purveyor in the county, and so we stepped in to do it at that point. Is that, I mean, I hope that
Yes.
answers what you're asking.
Does the time and a half, as far as you know, offset our costs enough?
Well, we would probably want to do a little more detailed study to answer exactly how that's breaking even, but I will say it will be a challenge for that to work that
Okay.
way. Yes.
So if we aren't able to sell it to somebody else or not have to do this anymore, and it's continuing to cost taxpayers money, are there other options like increasing that time and a half, or is there a cap on that?
Well, right now it's part of your rate ordinance. And so we apply that the same as we do somebody lives out 21 West or 7 East. So all out of city limit customers. So I would think in general, and Counselor may correct me, but in general, we have to apply that evenly. So if we're going to change our rate structures, by the way, just 4 or 5 years ago, Mr. Jeffers, we had our study done, rate study done 4 years ago. And part of that evaluation is to look at these multipliers and see, so they spent months looking at our expenses and what does it cost to serve and what does it cost to be in standby to serve. And so there's a lot of factors that go into that. I will tell you that 1.5 times is a very, very, very common number that you will see for out of city limit services in other cities. So it's not an unusual number. Do we make money on it? Something we'd have to probably give you more detail, but I will tell you, we have, as y'all know, we've spent millions of dollars in Central Heights over the years, and we are programming millions more in the future of some form, tanks and pipes and lines. So we are open, and we have talked to a couple of private firms have approached us about Central Heights. Nothing's ever come to fruition about that. We do adjoin several water supply corporations, and there may be some avenues there. So we've had discussions on, is there any way to do this better? But any way you go, we're the water supplier, even if we're a wholesaler to somebody else. So yeah, I think we're trying to explore options that are more economical for this. But at the same time, we have the responsibility to serve these folks. And so we've got to maintain that until a better option exists.
Is this the only one that we own the system itself versus the 21 East and West and all the
Correct. Well, it's become ours. We adopted it. So all those lines are ours. We operate, maintain them, meters, everything. So we just added this as a big group as opposed to the ones we extended 500 feet at a time.
So is there not a way to discriminate with this one in particular and have it be a 2 times or 2.5 times multiplier versus the others that were fixed at 1.5?
And I don't know the answer to that. That's something I've never seen where you had a tiered rate for by geography, by location.
Gotcha.
So I guess that's something we could surely explore. I think the model is kind of averaging the cost over over all your out of city limit folks. Some are more expensive and some are on brand new lines and the maintenance cost is less. And so it's always been an averaging of that. But it's certainly something we'll continue to look into. Like I say, right now it's been a topic of discussion for us to try to see if there's better solutions. And there's no easy answers to that, or we'd have brought it to you already, but we're seeking that.
To what extent, or is it even possible to require developers to participate in the cost of the service expansion?
Like as they would build a new subdivision, you're saying?
Well, Case mentioned that there are 1.25-inch lines serving entire subdivisions, and the subdivisions probably weren't there when those lines were originally installed, I'm guessing, given the speed of development in that area. And I was just curious to what extent those
and that's a good
developers
question.
are participating in this.
Let's pick a couple. Blue Lake subdivision, right just south of the school, was put in. They paid for all full-size water lines, fire hydrants, everything, even though the rest of the system may have inadequacies in supply to them. So they were required to pay for and install, expected by us to put in full-size, if you will, almost future facilities with fire protection. The same, not Cimarron, and I'm blank on the Cascades, thank you. Was the same thing. Mr. Liebram did that and put in all full-size water lines. So we are doing that with all the new developments. How far do you make them reach out and go is a good question. Do they go and increase the plant? Well, that just wouldn't be a typical format for a developer. But yes, the developers are paying for upsized, if you will, full-size water lines, including fire protection.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else? If not, Chair would entertain a motion for board approval.
I'll make a motion motion we pass agenda item number 8 as it's written.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. We approve agenda item number 8 as written. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Okay, now we can do number 9. Consider ordinance amending ordinance number 1778-9-18. Good evening, Mr. Jeffers.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. What Council's asked to consider tonight is a 3% cost of living adjustment for all full-time employees. Last time we did that was in 2018. Most know that our problem fund in the city is our general fund. And one of the reasons that we always have difficulty, that's where the bulk of the employees are, primarily public safety as well as public works. We would like to give raises at the beginning of our fiscal year in October, but sometimes it's just not possible. And that's what has happened this year. And so we wait late in the fiscal year to see whether or not we can afford it. And obviously $184,000 is a little bit more palatable than $565,000, but that $565,000, we have to pay that next year. Salaries tend to never go away. If the council approves this evening, I suspect we will not be looking at a pay increase in October. We're probably going to have to wait another year before we consider it. Also, I think it's rather obvious when we do an across-the-board COLA, those employees who make more, they get a larger increase. Those who make less, they get less of an increase. And obviously, that's not equitable. Every 3 to 5 years, we do a salary survey. That's become a lot more manageable, palatable, would you advance the slide? I'm not getting it done. Maybe somebody turn me off, Mr. Bartlett, or Case rather. One of our the challenge of salary surveys is not near as expensive as it used to be, simply because the Texas Municipal League does an annual statewide salary survey. There's not 100% participation, but it gives us enough information so that we can make adjustments based on remaining competitive instead of an arbitrary cost of living adjustment. Typically, when we do the salary survey, those who make more receive 0, and those who make less on the pay scale, they receive more significant pay increases, looking to maintain that appropriate balance. But this particular year, we're recommending the cost of living adjustment across the board because we are late in the fiscal year. If the council approves it, the pay date of that first check would be June the 21st. A lot of baby boomers are retiring, yay, and you can't replace them. The workforce that is following the baby boomers is a lot smaller. We hear that from our private sector employees, that they're having difficulty in finding bodies, period, and they're having greater difficulty in finding employees who have the skill set that they need. We're no different. We struggle with keeping full staff in the police department, but it's not only the police department, also water and sewer. We're required to have certified people. There are fewer and fewer of those employees. They're not mobile, but there doesn't seem to be any easy way to address it. You can't throw money at it. It blows up your pay scale, And so we still have an awful lot of work to do in recruiting and retaining. And one of the things that is critical is that we have to do cost of living adjustments. We have to do the salary surveys and the associated raises. If we don't, then it becomes virtually impossible to recruit as well as retain. Madam Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this agenda item? Okay, hearing none. Council? Questions or comments? Well, I think it's very sad. We have some people that are below the minimum, and it would be nice to have a plan. Is that something that wouldn't be looked at until it is time to do another salary survey?
Typically, that's when we look at it, is the salary survey. And when you say minimum,
It says here the majority of city positions pay at the minimum of the salary range, while some are below the minimum.
oh, that is in comparison to what the salary survey says. So with the salary survey, they have an entry level, they have a mid-range, and they have a high range. We have very few employees that are in the high range. City Council years ago said, hey, we want to be in the middle of the pack. We don't want to be lagging. We don't want to be too high. We just need to be in the sweet spot. And it's become more and more difficult to stay in the sweet spot, and we tend to be on the bottom of that pay scale. And frankly, I would say that a majority of our employees, especially if they're new, they're at the bottom of that salary survey pay scale, and that's part of the problem. If we don't do the COLAs, if we don't do raises that are recommended by the salary survey, then we continue to slip further behind. And remember, with our enterprise funds, which is the utility fund and the sanitation fund, those are funded by rates. The general fund, tax structure, we seem to be more hesitant to increase taxes for various things, and that's the primary reason why the general fund tends to struggle. We don't treat it like an enterprise fund, and I can make a pretty strong case that we should, but then, whether or not we have the political will, whether or not the citizens will support that, that's another issue, and we'll have some very lively discussions on that as we continue with the budget adoption process.
I have one question about certification. If we hire an employee that's not certified prior to being hired, do we have a certification program that the city provides for that employee to be certified?
Yes, is the short answer. And certifications are required in water, sewer, police, fire. With police, it's not unusual to hire somebody that's not certified. The danger of that is that when we send them to school and we pay for it, there are recruiters at those schools. And you can't enter into a contract that commits them, an enforceable contract, that commits them to coming and staying in the community. And so one of the things that Chief Seavey does, he's always looking for individuals who have family ties to the community, and they want to be here. They're not going to go anywhere. We certainly don't want to take advantage of them financially. But those issues have now spilled over into positions, as I mentioned earlier, that require certifications. Council may remember, and Councilmember Fisher, you weren't on the council yet, but we couldn't hire an electrician. And after we looked at it, we said, we're not going to be able to hire an electrician. If somebody comes to work for us for what it is that we pay, you probably don't want them. And so we began contracting that out, and we're spending less or about the same amount of money that we were paying. We don't have access to them like you would an employee, so you're having them work less hours, you're paying out more money, but quite frankly, we can't afford to pay a competitive salary for an electrician because it blows up our entire pay scale. And if we don't think that employees don't know what their coworkers make, then you're mistaken. A lot of times employees know that somebody got a raise before it even comes across my desk. And that's just part of what it is that we have to deal with. And it adds some pressure, some discussions about, I need to be making this, or that position should pay this, and we welcome that, but we're limited by the resources that we have.
I have a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
You said you could make a pretty good argument as to why the rest of the staff positions should be treated, or the fund should be treated the way that water and sewer are funded by rates. I would like to hear that that good argument that you have. I don't know if now is the appropriate time or if it's something that we should put on an agenda for a future meeting.
It will, excellent, and it will be a part of the budget discussions. And I'll probably be a little bit more robust about it this year than what I have been in the past, because I think that we're on the verge of having some really difficult issues with being able to retain and hire qualified individuals. And once again, you can put money into positions to where we're having those problems, but the rest of the employees are watching, and why are they getting a raise and I'm not getting a raise? I'm seeing Jan nod her head that if Jefferson gets a raise, she's going to get a raise, and actually it'd be the other way around. But that's normal, that's human nature, and it is an issue that we have to deal with, and putting money towards, say, some positions that require certification in water and sewer, and they pay more and they receive certification pay. But even if we paid more, the workforce isn't out there. There's nobody for us to go and hire. And so it's an issue that we're having discussions with the state about. Certainly don't know what the answer is yet, but something has got to give. You got to make sure that our water is safe. So you certainly want qualified people in those positions, and we'll discuss those issues more. But the COLA is a very small piece of addressing the issue, but it's all that we can afford right now. But you're going to be in a position sooner rather than later where you're going to be talking about that you can't afford not to take some pretty drastic steps in order to make sure that our workforce is adequately compensated so that we can be competitive. But then we're back into the catch-22. Even if you're paying more, the people aren't out there. There aren't people to replace the retiring baby boomers in a lot of positions.
Anything else?
Roughly how many positions do you foresee in the next, whatever number is comfortable, 5 years, 10 years, where we're going to have pretty dire circumstances? Is that, out of 300 folks, is that 40 or 50 different spots or 60 spots we need to struggle to fill? Or
when you talk about police, you're talking about 60. Chief Seavey's either nodding his head yes or no. Um, but that's the general area of the employees, and that's always a hot button. It's interesting that there was a department that had a billboard at the SFA campus offering a salary much higher than what we could pay for police officers. Those are the time, and they're desperate. They can't compete with the larger metropolitan areas. Nobody seems to be able to compete with the Department of Public Safety. But after that, you can probably throw in another, and I'm guessing we'll prove up these numbers to see how wrong I was, but I'd say another 30 to 50 employees.
So if we have some runway, wild idea, is there any kind of a internship effort we can make with some of the surrounding high schools, kind of like what we have in mind with the tech center we've been working on for quite some time? Are there any legs to some crazy idea like that, where we get some attention at least drawn to what could be an opportunity to stay in the community?
You know, in the past, I would say yes, that's a great path forward. Now, we're not sure that it is, simply because we're training people to go somewhere else, and that's unacceptable. And we just don't have any good answers, and we continue to search. I can assure you that your division directors, they're always tossing ideas at administration, saying, what about this? What about that? And we haven't found the silver bullet yet, but we'll keep hunting, and I'm confident that we will find it.
If nothing else, the chair will entertain a motion to consider that approving the ordinance.
I'll make a motion that we pass agenda item number 9 as it's written, to pass
Second.
the amending ordinance number 1778-9-18.
Second that.
Okay, moved and seconded that we consider approving agenda item number 9 as it is written. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. And agenda item number 10, we have a budget presentation on the utility fund and sanitation fund revenues and debt service fund.
And Madam Mayor, City Council, on behalf of the 320 employees, I know that they're all grateful for the cost of living adjustment, and so thank you on behalf of those employees. Mr. Opperman misspoke earlier and said that he didn't want it to stop raining, but as a city manager that needs to sell some water to balance the utility budget, we need it to dry out just a bit. When you look at our revenues on this particular slide, you can see that water sales are at 61%, where if we were following a traditional dividing up the pie by 12, we should be at 67%. 61% is not bad, and you're going to see that begin to catch up during the summer months, but a lot of it is dependent upon how much it rains. You know, I need to talk a little bit about water sales and sewer sales, and the council took a step 4 years ago and did a major utility study, also looked at sanitation, and we restructured how we charge for water and sewer, because the old rate structure, which we're not even sure how old it was, but say at least 30, 35 years, and no one knows for sure how it was structured. But after the drought of record, that rate structure was broken. During the drought of record, we altered how we consumed water, and we use less, and then we go back into a normal year, and people continue to conserve and we're not generating the revenues that we need to take care of infrastructure as well as salaries. And so we needed a big rewrite as to how we charge. Now we have minimum charges for water meters based on the size of the meter. And if anyone's interested in seeing those numbers, let us know and we can get them to you. And that is, all this is being phased in over a 5-year period simply because the increases that are placed largely on industrial, it was too expensive for them to absorb in one bite. But as we look at the revenues in the utility fund, we're about where we should be at this time of the year. There's really no major concerns. And as you look at the utility fund revenue, and then you had that drought of record that started in about 2012, you can see what happened to our revenue stream. It dropped significantly as we asked people to conserve, and it never fully recovered. And then in 2017, you were beginning to see the impact of the rate increase that we had. And a lot of the revenue excesses that are coming from the utility fund are going towards future infrastructure. Our engineering department always finds ways to spend that money on some badly needed projects, and there's more to come other than what's happening with Central Heights. And on Central Heights, heard what the city council said, and we'll figure out some way to do some analysis. One of the dangers of a draconian rate outside the city limits, which may be necessary, is that the residents can appeal to TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to come in, review the rates, and you got to be able to justify them. And so whatever those rates should be, then there has to be justification. And frankly, I'm not aware of any city that has water charges based on where you live in your community. It's an interesting question, and we will certainly do research in that area. But once again, you can see that the water and sewer revenues are continuing their recovery from those drought of record years. When we look at the sanitation fund total revenues, when there are major fluctuations in that revenue stream, it's usually associated with landfill admission fees. For some reason, some years you have a lot more people that are going into the landfill and paying charges as they enter the gate. But please note that the sanitation fund revenues had been flat for many years. And when you hear these frightening costs about entombing your trash that will be the same as it is 100 years from now, you've got to set aside reserves to build new cells, also to close owed cells, and to maintain those cells. And all those are done under the direction of the Texas Environmental Commission, or the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Be mindful on a landfill that there is a giant hefty bag that's really thick on the bottom of the landfill, so that you can't have percolation into the groundwater. And all those, there's systems to pull the liquid out. And then when you finish filling up a cell with trash, then you put that same plastic cover on the top. And like I said, it is literally entombed. So it's going to be there for a while. But in our part of the world, I say it's necessary in order to protect our valuable groundwater. Looking at sanitation charges, and these are the revenues that you pay for having your trash picked up at your home. You can see once again that they've been very flat. That is not going to allow us to do what we need to do, and you're going to see some additional proposed increases in sanitation charges, and of course the City Council will make the final decision as to what we do here. This is what I was making reference to earlier on landfill gate receipts, that they can fluctuate wildly. Sometimes there's an explanation, most of the time there's not a explanation. We mentioned that we're in year 4 of a 5-year rate study implementation. The only change that is coming up in the new fiscal year is the industrial rate for water increases from $2.89 per thousand to $3.09 per thousand. No changes in the sewer, and we're still reviewing the sanitation charges. Outstanding debt, I guess 15 years ago that number was in excess of $75 million, and the council back then said no more debt unless absolutely necessarily. You have paid that down nicely. There hasn't been a bond issue review committee in quite some time, and typically what you're going to do with your bonded debt are very large projects that you can't take care out of operations. And that's going to be a topic for future discussion for the council, to talk about whether or not there is a need for financing some very large projects. The comprehensive plan suggests that Pearl Street be improved to carry traffic, north-south traffic. That is a very expensive project, several million, probably 20 years ago. Don't have a current number, and so that's the type of project that you would discuss and say, hey, do we need to ask the voters whether or not they want to finance a project of that nature? But you're in good shape with your outstanding debt. Madam Mayor, I'll be happy to answer questions after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that has a comment or question about this agenda item? Quiet bunch tonight. Council, questions or comments for Mr. Jeffers? Okay. Thank you for your presentation. We have agenda item number 11, consider alternative city council meeting formats.
Madam Mayor and City Council, you've heard that we have lots of issues that the council would like to spend more time discussing. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's important that you be informed. It's important that you get your questions answered, because great ideas come from those discussions. Everybody's aware that the City Council meets on the first and third Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Typically, there are no meetings outside of that regular schedule. Open forum was added over a year ago. The consent agenda allows the council to spend more time on issues of greater importance. The council relations policy requires that the city give the public the opportunity to comment on each agenda item, and you need to, I think you're all aware that you're on TV right now, and Roy, you need a little bit more makeup.
Head
And,
shining.
and also social media. You can go and look at council meetings, past council meetings, whenever you want, an indication that you don't have a life. but that's okay if that makes you excited. City council meeting format. The options are endless. I have seen pretty well everything. Some councils have work sessions prior to the meeting. Some of them do it on the same day. Some of them do it a week before. That's an option to consider to make sure that the council has all the information that it needs. One of the things that you need to guard against is if you're doing a work session, you're not doing it in this room to where it's being recorded, then you're kind of cutting the public that's watching at home out of the process. And so if you do that, I would recommend that you do it in this room. Work sessions, which you had a budget work session last year that I think went well, but the mayor can call a work session at any time. Of course, a quorum has to show up or there's not a meeting. And I believe it's 3 city council members can ask for a special work session. Usually a special work session is restricted to a given topic, such as economic development or the budget. When you look at work sessions, you can, if you want to institutionalize them, you can say you're going to have one a month, one once a quarter, one only as you need it. One option for the council to consider is that our agendas aren't overly long compared to what a lot of entities have. But since you meet twice a month, you can take one council meeting, and that's where you can conduct the bulk of your business. The second council meeting would have a very light agenda at the beginning, only items that need to be addressed. And then you go into a work session. You're here, and you don't have to play calendar checkers, or Jan doesn't have to play calendar checkers, trying to find a date to where you can get everybody together. I want to emphasize that work sessions are for the council. They're not for staff, even though we learn. So this is whatever the council wants to do, and we will accommodate those wishes. City council meeting format is addressed in the council relations policy. We do not have Robert's Rules of Order. You can change the start time of a meeting. A lot of councils, they will start meeting at 8 a.m., 12 noon, and in a work session environment, and then they slip into the business part after 5 o'clock or 5:30, so that if the public wants to attend, that they are able to. Agenda format, there is no magic sauce there. I'm the one right now that arranges the agenda format, and I tend to move things around based on where I sense that the council might be interested, and the things of maybe higher interest of the council, they're up first before your eyes begin to glaze over. And then we put items such as city council meeting format later on the agenda. One item that hasn't received much discussion, but is multiple readings before adoption of an ordinance. Some cities have a charter requirement that ordinances have to be read twice. Some of them say 3 times before they go into effect. And typically what happens when nobody pays attention to what's on the agenda, and then they read Nicole's article and her very witty comments about restrooms. Told you I'd get that in, Nicole. And then they say, whoa, I didn't know that that was going to happen. But if you have multiple readings, a lot of times that gives the public the opportunity to come in, and then there would be exceptions for sometimes there's an emergency and an ordinance needs to be read one time. Madam Mayor, after public comment, I shall return for your reviews.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Council? Questions, comments, clarifications? Want to sleep on it and talk about it another time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
a lot of
certainly,
information.
I certainly like the idea of having more just
Work
general
sessions.
discussion time, work session time. I would be hesitant to place that directly before a meeting, just because a lot of times when I come out of discussion, there may be more homework that I want to do before deciding on something. So
certainly,
I tend, at least initially, to kind of like the idea of stacking the agenda a little more heavily one meeting each month and having more work session time in the other meeting.
Okay.
Because it does alleviate the potential scheduling problems with adding meetings, but
okay.
I'm open to any number of things.
Agreed. I love the idea of having work sessions. I'm curious, what for economic development in particular, that's one area where I'd really like to spend some time. Would that be better suited in one of the two formats, special work session versus work session? Or are those one and the same?
One and the same. Work session is that it's scheduled. Special work sessions being called as needed.
Got it. Okay.
I like the idea of us maybe going into it being flexible and trying it one, if there's a consensus that we'd like to do it for one meeting, we try that 1 month and see how it goes. And we decide, on a topic or topics, we can discuss more than one thing, in one evening and see how that goes, if it works for everyone. And we could start that. We're getting into budget, but we could probably start that July maybe. Or we only have one meeting in July.
Yeah, but
maybe
you can start at any time. It's like, okay, and by the way, work session topics, I would recommend that the council collectively picks those topics and that it's not being driven by staff. A lot of times the agenda is driven by staff because we're taking care of business that needs to be taken care of. And so the work session is an opportunity for the council to talk about in depth what you want to talk about. Therefore, I think it's important that you can have a list of topics, but the council says, and I think obviously since it's budget time, yay, that there could be multiple work sessions on the budget, but the council would decide how many they are. And you can cover more than one topic in a work session. So if you wanted to do an hour on budget and then do an hour on economic development, maybe you should turn those around. Then you can do that. There's no requirement other than you got to give notice to the public. And typically in the work session, the way it's posted, there will be no vote. It's entirely discussion. And sometimes it's clear that a consensus has merged, but typically we don't do anything based on what has taken place in a work session that would go on a future agenda, and then there would be a vote.
The work session plus the 2 regular city council meeting, right?
I think that what I'm hearing is to stick with 2 council meetings, and one of the council meetings is a work session.
Well, we might do that, and we might have additional work we might need to have an additional work session.
Yeah, certainly for things
separate.
like budget, we have to have additional ones.
I mean, the only issue I see is scheduling, because right now we have difficulty getting city council members to events that's, critical to the city, that, that we exposure. So I do think that I would see a scheduling problem with the work session, but I'm okay with it.
Well, and I think it's
Calling
important
us-
to have everyone there too.
Yeah,
I mean, I would
yeah,
like for
yeah,
everyone to be able to attend a work session. I think that's much more critical
Oh, most definitely.
than just having the quorum. So, well,
If we,
go ahead.
if we were to do a work session right before a council meeting, I mean, that wouldn't, what we discuss in that work session doesn't necessarily have to be in the meeting right after. So it's not like we would have to vote on something that we discussed immediately after we have a work session.
Right,
about
it depends on how it's posted.
Right.
So if I'm stuck on economic development because it's an easy topic. If you want to discuss economic development in a work session prior to a council meeting, but there's nothing scheduled to vote, then that's great. Or if you want to discuss economic development in a work session and then there's a vote on something about economic development, that's great too.
But we can also always, I mean, in that city council meeting, move to table it until the next one if we want to
Absolutely.
think about it.
This is open to the public, right? Work
Absolutely.
sessions are open to the public.
I like it.
Madam Mayor, help me out. What is it that
So
we like?
what do you want us to,
I think collectively we like the front
think about it.
one heavily loaded meeting with one work session, and then for those where we need to have additional work sessions, maybe bolting those onto the front of one of the meetings.
Did you say boating or Bowden?
Bolting.
Bolting.
Bolton.
Bolting. I think we need to decide what those topics are that, I mean, a council person can bring to the, would like to discuss at a work session, so we'll know what those are. And then again, I would reiterate being flexible, and we try it for 1 month and see how that works for us. And if we need to schedule something outside of a council meeting, then we have that option to do that also.
And Madam Mayor, if I may suggest that the council email me your hot buttons for work session, and we'll share that at the next meeting, and then you can prioritize those, and then you're off and running.
And frequently, the work sessions are ongoing discussions. It's not like we have one meeting and we decide something is going to be decided. There may be a lot of thought and some research involved in it. Okay, I'm excited. That sounds good. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was just we don't need to vote. We just had a discussion on it. Okay, great. We are now going to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters, consultation with legal counsel for the city, possible deliberation regarding economic development. It is now 7 p.m. And if you would like to wait until we come back and possibly take action, you are welcome to. If you leave, thank you for attending tonight's meeting. No,
I don't have the official.
No, not yet. Okay. We have now returned from executive session. It is 8:30 p.m. We had, let's see, first personnel matters, and the chair would entertain a motion for the approval of Heather Watts as municipal court judge.
I move to approve Heather Watts as municipal court judge.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. For the other two items on the executive session, there was no action taken. So the meeting for June 4th is now adjourned.
Just practice, practice.